She was sent to prison for another's crime, until the Duke risked his name to prove her innocence. The stone walls of Brackenhaven prison stood like silent sentinels against the gathering dusk, indifferent to the injustice they contained. Rain pelted the narrow window of Marienne Solvryn's cell, the droplets tracing paths like tears down the cold glass. 3 months had passed since they had dragged her through these halls, her name sullied, her soul intact. "Another visitor, Solvryn," the guard announced, his voice echoing against the damp stone, "though I can't imagine who'd waste their time." Marienne lifted her gaze, fingers instinctively closing around the small brass talisman hidden in the folds of her dress. "I shall receive no one," she replied, her voice soft yet unyielding. The guard's laughter cut through the gloom. "As if you had a choice. The magistrate demands your presence." She followed him through the winding corridor, head held high despite the weight of iron at her wrists. The whispers followed her. Thief, they called her. Conspirator, they claimed. Woman who dared reach above her station, they meant. The visiting chamber was bare save for a solitary table and 2 chairs. Marienne's heart faltered when she saw not the magistrate, but Countess Valendra Morn seated like a queen upon her throne, ebony hair immaculate, lips curved in calculated sympathy. "My dear Miss Solvryn," Valendra murmured, her voice honeyed poison, "how dreadfully you look. Prison does not become you." "Nor does falsehood become you, my lady," Marienne replied, though she knew such words would cost her. The Countess's smile never wavered. "I thought you might wish to know that your mother's cottage has been seized. The Crown takes a dim view of harbouring a thief's possessions." Marienne's knuckles whitened. "I took nothing from Radenholt. The court was mistaken." "The brooch was found among your things," Valendra replied, opening her fan with a sharp snap. "The cipher in your hand. Really, did you think no one would notice?" "I notice a great many things," came a deep voice from the doorway. The room stilled. Framed against the light stood a figure Marienne had seen only from afar, tall, commanding, with eyes like winter steel. The Duke of Altair, Ceren Radenholt, master of the very house from which she had allegedly stolen. "Your Grace." Valendra rose instantly, her curtsy deep and practiced. "What an unexpected pleasure." "Is it?" he asked, removing his gloves with measured precision. His gaze, however, remained fixed on Marienne. "Leave us, Countess." "Surely your Grace does not wish to be alone with—" "I said leave us." His tone brooked no argument. When the door closed behind Valendra, silence stretched between them. Marienne refused to lower her eyes, though every instinct urged her to shrink before his scrutiny. "They say you took a family heirloom from my study," he said at last. "A bronze brooch centuries old, along with documents of state importance." "I did not," she answered, her voice steadier than her heart. "Then why did you not defend yourself at trial? Who would believe a governess over a duchess? The evidence was presented. My fate was sealed before I spoke a word." The Duke approached, his footsteps echoing like judgment. "And yet you show no fear now, standing before the man you supposedly wronged." "I have nothing left to lose, Your Grace. They have taken my freedom, my name, my mother's home. My fear was consumed long ago by injustice." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He studied the iron at her wrists, then the proud line of her shoulders. "The evidence was neat," he said finally. "Too neat. A woman of your intelligence would have hidden her tracks with greater care." Marienne's breath caught. "You think me innocent?" "I think," he said carefully, "that this prison holds secrets darker than its stones." He reached inside his coat and withdrew a small brass key. Before she could comprehend his intent, he had unlocked her shackles, letting them fall with a clatter to the floor. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Testing a theory." He took her hands in his, turning them gently. The skin was rubbed raw. "These are not the hands of a thief, Miss Solvryn. The court says otherwise." "Then perhaps," said the Duke, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity, "the court requires correction." As he stepped away, Marienne felt something pressed into her palm, a folded parchment sealed with wax. "Tell no one of this visit," he instructed, his voice lowered. "Read this only when alone." He turned to leave, but paused at the threshold. "I shall return, Miss Solvryn, and when I do, truth shall walk beside me." The door closed behind him, leaving Marienne clutching the forbidden message, her heart beating a dangerous rhythm of something she dared not name. Hope. The Duke's carriage cut through the fog that shrouded London's streets, wheels splashing through puddles that mirrored the gas lamps overhead. Inside, Ceren Radenholt sat rigid, his thoughts as turbulent as the weather beyond the window. "My lord," ventured his secretary, breaking the tense silence, "might I inquire as to your intentions regarding the Solvryn matter?" You may not, Ceren replied, his tone clipped. Suffice it to say that justice has been ill-served. The court was unanimous, Your Grace. The evidence was arranged with particular care, Ceren interrupted. Tell me, Morris, have you ever observed how a theatre set appears perfect from the audience, yet reveals its artifice when viewed from behind? The secretary shifted uncomfortably. I fail to see the comparison. Then you fail to see what matters most. The Duke withdrew a small brass talisman from his waistcoat, a match to the one Marienne wore hidden. This was found not in Miss Solvryn's possession, but in Lady Valendra's writing desk. Curious, is it not, that the supposed thief would part with one token while keeping its twin? Morris paled. Your Grace, these accusations against a lady of the Countess's standing are mine to make, Ceren said, his voice hardening, and I shall make them with evidence that cannot be dismissed. The carriage halted before a modest townhouse in Bloomsbury. A single light burned in the upper window, casting a feeble glow against the darkness. Wait here, the Duke commanded, stepping into the rain. The door opened to reveal a thin man with nervous eyes and ink-stained fingers. Your Grace, he stammered, bowing deeply. I received your message. Please enter quickly. Inside, the cramped study was lined with books and scrolls. The man, Everett Thorne, master of ciphers, gestured to a table where documents lay spread beneath a lamp. I've examined the letters, as you requested, Thorne said, hands fluttering like anxious birds. The cipher found in Miss Solvryn's chamber, and the one from your family archives. And, Ceren prompted, removing his damp coat. They are not written by the same hand, Your Grace. Observe the pressure points, the angle of descent. The sample attributed to Miss Solvryn shows hesitation marks consistent with forgery. The Duke's eyes narrowed. Can you prove this before a magistrate? With proper equipment and light, yes. But Your Grace, Thorne hesitated, lowering his voice, these matters implicate powerful people. The Countess has friends in Parliament, in the courts. As do I, Ceren replied, though both men recognized the challenge ahead. I shall need copies of your findings, sealed and ready by tomorrow. As the Duke prepared to depart, Thorne cleared his throat. If I may ask, Your Grace, what is your interest in this governess? Why risk so much? Ceren paused at the door, rain dripping from his greatcoat. Because justice is not merely the province of those who can purchase it, Mr. Thorne, and because I have witnessed too many sacrificed upon the altar of convenience. The journey back to Radenholt House was silent, the Duke's thoughts turning to Marienne's face, proud even in captivity, eyes that held firm against despair. He had not expected such dignity, such composure. It unsettled him in ways he could not dismiss. In the privacy of his study, Ceren unlocked a hidden drawer and withdrew a leather portfolio. Inside lay newspaper clippings, court transcripts, and private correspondence spanning months, the constellation of a conspiracy he was only beginning to comprehend. A knock interrupted his contemplation. Enter, he called, concealing the documents. His butler appeared, face grave. Lady Valendra Morn requests an audience, Your Grace. At this hour? Interesting. Ceren straightened his cravat. Show her in, but remain within earshot, Fletcher. I suspect this conversation should have witnesses. Valendra swept into the study like darkness itself, her black gown rustling against the carpet. Your Grace, I must speak with you on a matter of delicacy. Indeed. Ceren gestured to a chair, but remained standing himself. I confess I'm curious what brings you to my door so late. Concern for your reputation. Her smile did not reach her amber eyes. I've heard troubling rumors of your visit to Brackenhaven today, to the Solvryn woman of all people. News travels quickly. In certain circles, yes. She leaned forward, voice softening. Ceren, forgive my familiarity, but this attention to a convicted thief raises questions. Questions a man of your standing cannot afford. The Duke's expression revealed nothing. How curious that my concern for justice should prompt such protective instincts in you, Countess. We have known each other since childhood, she replied. I would not see you misled by a pretty face and a convincing lie. Nor would I see an innocent woman imprisoned for another's crime. He watched her carefully. Tell me, how did you know which cell held Miss Solvryn? I don't recall mentioning her location. A momentary falter, quickly masked. The warden, naturally. We spoke when I visited last week on charitable business. Curious. He informed me today that you've never set foot in Brackenhaven. Ceren moved to his desk, retrieving a sealed document. Just as curious as finding your personal cipher on documents allegedly stolen by Miss Solvryn. Colour drained from Valendra's face. You exceed yourself, Your Grace. No, Countess, I believe I am only now meeting my obligation." His voice hardened. "Why did you frame her? What threat could a governess possibly pose?" "None," she said, rising abruptly. "And that is why your infatuation is so pathetic. Good evening, Your Grace." "Lady Valendra," he called as she reached the door, "know this, I shall see justice done, whatever the cost. Whatever secrets you bury will be exhumed." Her smile was cold as winter. "Then prepare to dig your own grave alongside hers." The brass talisman gleamed dully in Marienne's palm as she traced its worn edges with a fingertip. 3 nights had passed since the Duke's unexpected visit, 3 nights of reading his message by the scant moonlight that pierced her cell window. The parchment had crumbled to dust once read, a precaution, he'd written, against prying eyes. "Believe in me," his words had urged. "As I believe in your innocence, say nothing, trust no one. I am gathering what is needed to break these chains." A foolish hope, perhaps. And yet something in his eyes had compelled her trust, not pity but recognition, as though he too had stood falsely accused before an uncaring world. The cell door creaked open, admitting a guard she had not seen before. "Miss Solvryn, you're summoned to the warden's office." "At this hour?" Marienne concealed the talisman in the folds of her dress. "Has some new charge been manufactured against me?" The guard's expression softened unexpectedly. "Not all of us believe what was said at trial, miss. Please come quickly." She followed him through corridors she had not traversed since her arrival, past cells where women slept fitfully, their dreams their only escape. The warden's office stood at the end of a carpeted hallway, a space of relative luxury that mocked the squalor beyond. Inside, Warden Collins sat hunched behind his desk, face mottled with poorly concealed anxiety. Beside him stood a slight man with ink-stained fingers, whom Marienne did not recognize, but it was the third figure, tall, imposing, cloaked in midnight blue, who drew her gaze. "Miss Solvryn," the Duke of Altair greeted her with a formal bow. "I apologize for the hour." "Your Grace," she replied, curtsying despite her prison garb, "I am at your disposal, as are all Her Majesty's convicts." A ghost of a smile touched his lips at her subtle defiance. "Mr. Thorne," he gestured to the thin man, "is a master of ciphers employed by the Home Office. He has findings pertinent to your case." Thorne cleared his throat. "The document that condemned you, a cipher containing state secrets allegedly copied in your hand, was not your work, Miss Solvryn. I have certified this under oath." Marienne's heart quickened. "Then whose hand wrote my fate, sir?" "That," said the Duke, "is what we shall determine tonight. Warden Collins has agreed to grant us access to certain evidence kept in the prison vault." The warden squirmed. "Under protest, I must note. Lady Valendra's solicitors will what?" Ceren's voice cut like steel. "Challenge the Crown's prerogative to investigate a potential miscarriage of justice? I think not." They descended to the prison's bowels, where massive iron doors guarded confiscated possessions and evidence. Marienne shivered as they entered the vault, its air thick with the dust of forgotten lives. "The brooch was kept here," Collins indicated a small iron box, along with the cipher and letters. Ceren unlocked the box with a key from his waistcoat, then frowned. "Empty." "Impossible," the warden pushed forward. "I sealed it myself after the trial." "Yet, here we stand," the Duke said coldly, "before evidence that has conveniently vanished." Marienne stepped closer. "There," she said, pointing to a corner of the box. "A thread of silk, burgundy with gold embroidery." "Significant?" Thorne inquired. "Lady Valendra's personal stationery is edged with such thread. I noticed it when she brought letters for my students to study." Marienne met Ceren's gaze. She always wore gloves when handling her papers. "I thought it mere vanity, or prudence," the Duke replied, "for one whose fingerprints might raise questions." A commotion echoed from above. Voices raised, boots on stone. "We have company," Ceren observed grimly. "Earlier than anticipated." Collins paled. "Parliament men. Lady Valendra must have done exactly as expected," Ceren finished. He turned to Marienne, his expression suddenly urgent. "Miss Solvryn, I had hoped for more time, more evidence. But now I must ask, do you trust me?" She studied him. This nobleman who had no cause to champion her, who risked his name for a truth no one else sought. "Yes," she answered simply. "Then take this." He pressed a sealed envelope into her hands. "Memorize its contents when you are alone. It details accounts, dates, transactions that implicate not only the Countess, but members of Parliament in a conspiracy far greater than a stolen brooch. Why me? Because your mind is sharp, your memory keen, and because they believe you broken." His hand closed briefly over hers. I shall return within 3 days with the final proof. Until then, reveal nothing." The footsteps grew closer. Ceren nodded to Thorn, who produced a magistrate's writ from his coat. "Give them this," the Duke instructed the warden. "It authorizes our inspection tonight. Make no mention of the missing evidence." Collins accepted the document with trembling hands. "And if they search you, Your Grace, they will find nothing," Ceren assured him. Then, to Marienne's astonishment, he removed his signet ring and pressed it into her palm beside the envelope. "Keep this hidden as well. Should I fail to return, show it to the chaplain. He will know what to do." Before she could respond, the Duke and Thorn departed through a servant's passage, leaving her alone with the warden and the approaching storm. "Miss Solvryn," Collins whispered urgently, "return to your cell by the east corridor, quickly, before they arrive." She clutched her precious cargo and fled, heart pounding in concert with her footsteps. Inside her cell, Marienne pressed herself against the wall beside the door, listening as men's voices echoed down the corridor. They paused outside her cell, then moved on. Only when silence returned did she dare examine what the Duke had entrusted to her. The ring was heavy gold, its crest that of the Radenholt line, a falcon rising from flames. The envelope, when carefully opened, contained pages of meticulous notes in a firm hand. Names, dates, sums that made her breath catch. Shipments described in code that even she, with her limited worldliness, recognized as smuggling operations. And there, circled in red ink, Valendra Morn, principal investor. The brooch had been payment, not to Marienne but to a parliament man whose silence was required after witnessing a midnight exchange. "I was merely convenient," Marienne whispered to the darkness. "A governess with no family, no connections, the perfect scapegoat." She studied the documents until dawn painted her cell in pearl grey, committing every detail to memory before burning the pages in her meagre breakfast candle. The ring she concealed in a small gap beneath a loose stone in the wall. 3 days, the Duke had promised, 3 days until justice. But as the morning bell tolled, Marienne heard the warden's voice in the corridor, strained, apologetic. "Yes, my lady, the prisoner remains in her cell. No, she has spoken to no one." Marienne froze as a familiar rustle of silk approached, followed by the unmistakable scent of Valendra's French perfume. "Leave us," the Countess commanded. The key turned. The door swung open, and Marienne understood with sudden clarity that 3 days might be too long to wait. Valendra Morn closed the cell door behind her, her silk skirts whispering against the stone floor like secrets exchanged in darkness. In one gloved hand, she carried a small leather portfolio. In the other, a fan that she snapped open with practiced elegance. "You look unwell, Miss Solvryn," she observed, her voice lilting with false concern. "Prison does not agree with you." Marienne remained standing, her posture a silent refusal to be diminished. "What brings you to my cell, Lady Valendra? Surely not compassion." The Countess's laugh was musical, cold as winter bells. "Directness. How refreshing. Very well. I shall reciprocate." She closed her fan with a snap. "You received a visitor yesterday. A most distinguished visitor. The Duke of Altair," Marienne acknowledged, seeing no benefit in denial. "He had questions regarding the theft." "I imagine he did." Valendra circled the small cell like a predator assessing its prey. "Tell me, what did you and His Grace discuss during this interview?" Marienne kept her expression neutral. "He asked if I took the brooch. I maintained my innocence, as I have since the beginning." "And did he believe you this paragon of justice?" The Countess stopped before her, amber eyes searching. "Did he offer hope, perhaps? Promises of freedom?" "His Grace made no promises. Yet something changed. I see it in your eyes." Valendra opened her portfolio, withdrawing a folded newspaper. "This morning's edition carries interesting news. The Duke has petitioned for a review of your case, citing grave inconsistencies in evidence." Despite herself, Marienne's heart quickened. She had not expected Ceren to act so openly, so quickly. "How fascinating," Valendra continued, "that a man of his standing would concern himself with a governess. One might almost suspect personal interest." "His interest is in justice, my lady." "Is it?" The Countess moved closer, her perfume enveloping Marienne like a silken trap. "Consider this alternative. His Grace seeks to protect himself. The brooch you stole was not merely decorative. It contained documents that implicate powerful men in certain arrangements, men who would pay handsomely for their return." Marienne's mind raced through the information in Ceren's notes. "You suggest the Duke is involved in smuggling?" "I suggest nothing. Valendra's smile was sharp as a blade. I merely observe that a man who visits a convicted thief in secret may have motives beyond chivalry. Then why frame me at all? Why not simply retrieve your documents quietly? An excellent question. The Countess's gloved finger traced the edge of Marienne's wooden table. Perhaps to establish a clear culprit should questions arise, perhaps to remove an inconvenient witness. Or perhaps, her voice softened dangerously, because you were developing an unfortunate attachment to the Radenholt household. Marienne stiffened. I was a governess performing my duties. Indeed, though I observed how attentively His Grace watched you during the spring garden party, how he sought your opinion on the library selections. Valendra's eyes narrowed. A duke with a fascination for a governess. How unseemly, how vulnerable. The implication hung between them. Marienne herself was not the target. She was merely the weapon chosen to strike at Ceren. What do you want from me? Marienne asked, her voice steady despite the chill spreading through her veins. Sign this. Valendra withdrew a document from her portfolio. A full confession, acknowledging not only the theft, but your collaboration with foreign agents. In exchange, I shall arrange your transportation to the colonies, a new beginning far from English prisons. And if I refuse, then His Grace's petition will mysteriously reveal evidence of treason, not mere theft, the punishment for which is, she paused delicately, considerably more permanent than imprisonment. Marienne forced herself to breathe evenly. You would risk the Duke's reputation in this venture? His reputation. Valendra laughed. My dear, I would see it shattered beyond repair. He rejected my hand 3 seasons ago, choosing solitude over the alliance our families had planned since childhood. Her composure slipped, revealing a glimpse of raw hatred. No man refuses Valendra Morn without consequence. The revelation struck Marienne like physical blow. This elaborate scheme, her imprisonment, the stolen documents, perhaps even the smuggling operation itself, served not only profit, but revenge. I require your answer now, Valendra said, placing a pen beside the confession. Freedom or the gallows, choose wisely. Marienne's fingers trembled not with fear, but with fury, as she lifted the pen. Everything within her rebelled against capitulation, yet she saw no immediate path to victory. The Duke needed time to gather his evidence, and she needed to survive until he did. Very sensible, Valendra purred as Marienne bent over the document. But instead of signing, Marienne carefully read each line, her governess's thoroughness asserting itself even now. This confession is dated 3 days hence, she observed. Why? A minor administrative detail. The ship to Australia leaves on Thursday. Marienne set down the pen. I will consider your offer, my lady, but I require 24 hours. You are not in a position to negotiate. On the contrary, Marienne met her gaze steadily. I am in precisely such a position. For if the Duke's suspicions have substance, signing this confession now may prove premature. Valendra's expression hardened. You play a dangerous game, Miss Solvryn. No more dangerous than yours, my lady. Marienne gestured to the door. 24 hours. Then you shall have your answer. For a moment it seemed the Countess might refuse. Then her lips curved into a cold smile. Very well. 1 day to contemplate your future. Choose the gallows if you prefer. It makes little difference to me. After Valendra departed, Marienne sank onto her narrow bed, mind racing. The confession would condemn not only her, but potentially Ceren as well, if the document implied his complicity. Yet refusing outright would accelerate Valendra's plans. She needed to warn the Duke, but how? The prison walls surrounded her, impenetrable as the society that had so easily accepted her guilt. As twilight fell, Marienne removed the brass talisman from its hiding place. It had been her mother's final gift, a simple token carrying the promise that even in darkness, one might find one's way home. Guide me now, she whispered, pressing it to her lips. As if in answer, the sound of the evening meal cart echoed down the corridor, followed by the shuffle of the prison chaplain making his rounds. The chaplain. The Duke had mentioned him specifically. Should I fail to return, show the ring to the chaplain. Marienne concealed the talisman once more and moved to her door, waiting for the old man's approach. Perhaps in this darkest hour, faith might forge a path where reason could not. Reverend Thomas Blackwell had served as Brackenhaven's chaplain for 27 years, his shoulders now stooped with the weight of countless confessions. He paused outside Marienne's cell, peering through the small barred window with rheumy eyes. Evening prayers, Miss Solvryn? Yes, Father, though I would prefer to receive them privately today. Something in her tone must have alerted him. for he glanced both ways before unlocking her door. Once inside, he kept his voice low. "You seem troubled, my child." Marienne waited until he had seated himself on the room's only chair before speaking. "Father, I must ask, do you know the Duke of Altair?" Blackwell's weathered face revealed nothing. "I have had the honor of His Grace's acquaintance, yes. The Radenholt family has long supported the church's charitable work. Then perhaps you might recognize this." Marienne retrieved the signet ring from its hiding place, pressing it into the chaplain's palm. The old man's fingers closed around it instantly, his expression changing from mild interest to sharp focus. "Where did you get this?" "From His Grace himself 2 nights past. He instructed me to show it to you if he failed to return." Blackwell studied her with new intensity. "And has he failed?" "I do not know, but circumstances have become urgent." Swiftly she related Valendra's visit, the confession, the veiled threats against both herself and the Duke. When she finished, Blackwell rose, tucking the ring into his cassock. "Miss Solvryn, what I am about to tell you must remain between us. His Grace contacted me a fortnight ago, suspecting your conviction was part of a greater conspiracy. He requested my assistance should matters deteriorate." "What kind of assistance?" "The kind that sees innocent souls delivered from unjust bondage." He moved to the door, checking the corridor. "Tonight, when the midnight bell tolls, be dressed and ready. A laundry cart will pass your cell. The driver will whistle Greensleeves. That is your signal." Marienne's breath caught. "You propose escape?" "Father, that would only confirm my guilt in the world's eyes. Sometimes one must appear to fall before one can rise triumphant." Blackwell's eyes softened. "His Grace prepared for this contingency. Trust in his design, as he has trusted in your innocence." After the chaplain departed, Marienne paced her small cell, weighing impossible choices. Escape would brand her a fugitive, validating every accusation. Yet remaining meant either signing a false confession or facing Valendra's more permanent retribution. The hours passed with excruciating slowness. She packed her few possessions, the brass talisman, a small book of poetry, the clothes she had worn upon arrival. When the midnight bell tolled, she stood ready, heart thundering against her ribs. As promised, the rattle of a laundry cart approached. A soft whistle, the familiar notes of Greensleeves, floated through her window. Marienne pressed herself against the wall as her door opened silently. A figure in prison grey gestured urgently. "Quickly," whispered a woman's voice. "Exchange clothes with me." In the dimness, Marienne recognized Agnes Fletcher, a kitchen maid known for her Christian charity. "Agnes, you risk too much." "His Grace paid my brother's debts," the maid interrupted, already removing her cap. "I owe him this service. Now hurry." They exchanged garments swiftly. Agnes took Marienne's place on the bed, pulling the blanket high to conceal her face. "The cart will take you to the south gate," she instructed. "From there, follow the driver's directions exactly." Marienne hesitated, overwhelmed by the sacrifice. "I shall not forget this kindness, nor shall you need to if God is just. Now go." Heart pounding, Marienne pushed the laundry cart down the corridor, head bowed to avoid the guard's eyes. The south gate loomed ahead, its iron bars gleaming dully in the moonlight. A guard stepped forward, lantern raised. "Halt! What business at this hour?" "Hospital linen, sir," Marienne mumbled, mimicking Agnes's country accent. "Fever cases can't wait till morning," they said. The guard grunted. "Typhus again?" "Aye, sir, 3 new cases today." He stepped back, waving her through with evident distaste for contagion. "Be quick about it." Beyond the gate stood a plain black carriage, unmarked save for a small brass falcon on its door. The Radenholt crest, she realized with a start. The driver descended, face concealed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "The laundry girl, quickly now." Marienne approached, uncertainty threading through her newfound courage. "I seek the falcon's nest," she ventured, using the phrase Blackwell had given her, "and find it you shall." The driver's voice changed, revealing cultured tones beneath the affected roughness. He helped her into the carriage with a courtly gesture at odds with his common clothes. "We've little time, Miss Solvryn. Brackenhaven will discover your absence at dawn." Inside the carriage, a lantern illuminated the stern features of Everett Thorne, the cipher-master who had accompanied the Duke to the prison vault. "Mr. Thorne," Marienne acknowledged, settling across from him, "I did not expect to see you again so soon, nor I you under these circumstances." He handed her a sealed packet. "Your new identity papers. Memorize them before we reach the river." "The river?" "We travel to Greenwich tonight, then by merchant vessel to Dover." Thorne's expression was grave. "You cannot remain in London. Lady Valendra's reach is considerable, and your face is now known to authorities." As the carriage lurched forward, Marienne clutched the packet, a cold dread spreading through her. What of the Duke? Has he been arrested? Not arrested, no. Thorn hesitated, but his position has become precarious. Parliament members loyal to the Countess have raised questions about his interest in your case. Insinuations have been made. Then I must speak with him before I leave. I have information that may help his cause. Impossible. His Grace was explicit. Your safety is paramount. My safety? Marienne leaned forward, indignation overcoming caution. Mr. Thorn, I did not escape one prison to flee like a coward, while the only man who believed in my innocence faces ruin. Thorn studied her with newfound respect. The Duke warned me you would prove difficult. Determined, she corrected. There is a difference. Indeed, he sighed. Very well. We shall detour to Radenholt House, but only briefly, and only because His Grace left instructions for you in the event of your escape. Instructions I was to deliver personally. Relief washed through her. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Miss Solvryn. The night is young, and danger shadows every street in London, particularly for those who dare challenge Valendra Morn's ambitions. As the carriage wound through London's darkened streets, Marienne watched raindrops trace paths down the window, each one a tear she refused to shed. Freedom should have brought joy, yet instead she felt a mounting dread. What price would Ceren pay for championing her cause? And what awaited her at Radenholt House, sanctuary or farewell? The brass talisman pressed against her palm, its edges worn smooth by years of anxious touches. In the low light, its engraved motto caught the flame. Truth endures when courage stands beside it. Tonight, she vowed silently, she would prove worthy of both. Radenholt House rose like a fortress against the midnight sky, its windows dark save for a single light burning in the eastern wing. The carriage approached not by the main drive, but through a servant's entrance, hidden from the street by ancient yew hedges. His Grace maintains discretion, Thorn explained as they halted beneath a stone archway. The house will appear unoccupied to any watching eyes. They entered through a modest door that led directly to a narrow staircase. Marienne followed Thorn upward, counting 3 flights before they emerged into a corridor lined with ancestral portraits, generations of Radenholts gazing down with the same steel-grey eyes she had come to know. At the corridor's end stood a heavy oak door, which Thorn unlocked with a key from his waistcoat. His Grace's private study, few are granted entry. The room beyond breathed quiet elegance, walls lined with leather-bound books, a massive desk of polished mahogany, deep chairs arranged before a hearth where embers still glowed, but it was the figure silhouetted against the window that drew Marienne's attention. Ceren Radenholt turned as they entered, his face carved in shadow and firelight. For a moment he simply stared, as though confirming she was real and not some apparition conjured by hope. "Miss Solvryn," he said finally, his voice pitched low, "I am gratified to see you safe. Your Grace." She curtsied, suddenly aware of her borrowed servant's garb, her hair falling loose about her shoulders. "I believe this belongs to you." She extended her hand, offering his signet ring. He crossed to her in 3 strides, but rather than taking the ring, he closed her fingers around it. "Keep it. You may yet need its protection." "Surely not for much longer," she said. "Now that I am free, we can present your evidence to the authorities. Clear my name." Matters have grown more complicated. The Duke gestured to his desk, where newspapers lay spread. "This evening's edition. Read the marked passage." Marienne approached, heart sinking as she scanned the headline. "Duke of Altair summoned before Privy Council. Allegations of treason in connection with Brackenhaven escape." Treason? She looked up, aghast. They cannot possibly believe. What they believe is irrelevant. Ceren's expression hardened. "Valendra has played her hand well. The confession you were meant to sign has instead been discovered among your possessions, a document implicating both of us in espionage against the Crown." Understanding dawned like ice water. "She planned this from the beginning. My escape was anticipated." "Indeed. Had you remained and signed, you would have shouldered the blame alone. By escaping, I appeared guilty and dragged you into the conspiracy." Marienne sank into a chair, the weight of comprehension crushing her. "I have walked directly into her trap." "We both have." Ceren moved to a cabinet, withdrew a crystal decanter, and poured 3 glasses. Though perhaps not as blindly as she imagines. He handed glasses to Marienne and Thorn before raising his own. "To outmaneuvering our opponents." Marienne did not drink. "How can you speak of outmaneuvering when you face the Privy Council tomorrow? Your reputation, your title, everything stands in peril because of me. Not because of you. The Duke set down his glass untouched. Because I chose to pursue justice rather than convenience. That choice was mine alone. The choice you made without full knowledge, she insisted. Valendra visited my cell yesterday. She offered exile in exchange for a signed confession. And you refused? I delayed, seeking time. Marienne met his gaze directly. But there is more. The Countess revealed her true motivation. Revenge for your rejection of her hand in marriage. Something flickered in Ceren's eyes. Surprise, then swift comprehension. So this elaborate scheme was not merely about smuggling. It appears you wounded more than Valendra's pride, Thorn observed dryly. Hell hath no fury indeed. The Duke paced before the fire, his shadow stretching across the carpet. This changes our approach. Personal vendetta is a weakness we might exploit. How? Marienne asked. By giving her exactly what she desires. A public confrontation where she believes she holds every advantage. He turned to Thorn. The Dover arrangements. Cancel them. Miss Solvryn will not flee England. Your Grace, with respect, Thorn protested. The risk is extraordinary. If she is discovered, then we shall all hang together. Ceren finished with grim humor. A fitting end to an improbable alliance. Marienne rose, clutching the brass talisman that had become her anchor. What do you propose instead? Tomorrow's Privy Council hearing is closed to the public, but the evening assembly at Lancaster House is not. Ceren's eyes gleamed with strategic fire. Every power in London will attend, including Lady Valendra, who will doubtless wish to witness the culmination of her scheme. You suggest I appear publicly. I would be arrested on sight, not as Marienne Solvryn, escaped convict. He approached a bookshelf, pressed a hidden mechanism, and revealed a concealed compartment. From within, he withdrew a velvet box. But perhaps as Lady Marienne Altair, Duchess of Radenholt, you might move unrecognized. Silence fell as he opened the box, revealing a platinum ring set with sapphires and diamonds arranged in the shape of the Radenholt falcon. Your Grace, she breathed, understanding dawning. You cannot mean... A ruse only, he assured her quickly. A disguise to grant you protection and access. Society knows I have been abroad for years, seeking solitude after my parents' death. Few would question the appearance of a bride acquired during my travels. And afterward, when your name is cleared, something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability at odds with his confident manner. Afterward, the choice would be entirely yours. The marriage could be annulled, your name restored, your freedom assured. Marienne studied the ring, its stones catching firelight like captured stars. The proposal, even as temporary pretense, stole her breath. To stand beside him as his equal before society, to carry his name as shield rather than shackles, it awakened longings she had carefully buried beneath practicality. Your silence speaks volumes, Ceren said quietly. I ask too much. No, she replied, finding her voice at last. You offer too much, risking everything for a governess you scarcely know. I know enough. His gaze held hers, unwavering. I know you maintained dignity where others would have shattered. I know you prize truth above comfort. I know your mind is both sharp and just. He paused. What more should a man seek in an ally, temporary or otherwise? Thorn cleared his throat. If I might interject a practical concern, the ruse requires documentation, a marriage certificate, records of introduction. Already prepared, Ceren responded. I anticipated this contingency days ago, when Valendra's true game became clear. Days ago, Marienne echoed. You've planned this elaborate charade from the beginning. I've planned for various possibilities, he corrected. This simply proved the most expedient. She felt a smile threatening despite the gravity of their situation. Most expedient. Is that how all dukes propose marriage, Your Grace? To her surprise, a flush colored his stern features. I wouldn't know. I've never proposed before, in earnest or otherwise. The admission, so simply stated, shifted something fundamental between them. This powerful man, this champion of justice, had never offered his name to any woman, not even Valendra, whose family connections would have brought significant advantage. Very well, Marienne said, extending her hand. I accept your proposal, Your Grace, in pretense for justice. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, their eyes met, and for a moment, pretense seemed the flimsiest of veils over a truth neither dared name. Tomorrow, then, he said, his voice low, we face Valendra together. Together, she echoed, the weight of the ring both foreign and strangely right. As equals before the storm, dawn broke over London in streaks of amber and pearl, illuminating a city unaware of the drama about to unfold within its highest circles. In the guest chambers of Radenholt House, Marienne stood before a cheval mirror, barely recognizing the woman who gazed back at her. Gone was the prison grey, the loose hair of a fugitive. In their place stood a duchess, or at least the appearance of one, attired in a morning gown of deep sapphire silk, her hair swept into an elegant coiffure beneath a small hat adorned with silver netting. The transformation was the work of Mrs. Fletcher, the housekeeper, who had arrived before sunrise with trunks of clothing befitting her Grace's station. "The final touch," Mrs. Fletcher murmured, fastening a platinum pendant around Marienne's neck. Another falcon, wings outstretched in flight. "It's too much," Marienne protested. "Surely people will question. People will see what they expect to see, my lady, and they expect the Duke's bride to be adorned with family jewels." The older woman stepped back, satisfaction warming her stern features. "There, you'll pass muster now even among the most discerning eyes." A soft knock interrupted them. Thorn entered, bearing a leather portfolio. "Forgive the intrusion, miss. That is, your grace." He bowed formally, then presented the portfolio. "Your marriage certificate, signed and witnessed in Vienna 3 months past. Additionally, letters of introduction from the Baroness Kessler of Austria, attesting to your family's distinguished lineage." "My family?" Marienne accepted the documents with bemusement. "I wasn't aware I had one. For today, you are Lady Marienne Altair, née Valmont, orphaned daughter of a French diplomat and his Austrian wife. Raised primarily in Vienna, which explains any unfamiliarity with London society." She skimmed the elaborate fiction, marveling at its thoroughness. "These documents appear remarkably authentic." "They are authentic," came a deep voice from the doorway. Ceren entered, resplendent in formal morning attire, his cravat secured with a platinum pin that matched her pendant. "The certificates bear official seals. The signatures are legitimate. Even the paper is correct for Viennese documentation." "How is this possible?" "Mr. Thorn has connections in diplomatic circles, and I have resources few can match." His gaze swept over her, lingering for a moment before propriety reasserted itself. "You look entirely convincing, Miss Solvryn." "Marienne," she corrected gently. "If I am to play your wife, formality seems counterproductive." Something flickered in his eyes, warmth perhaps, or uncertainty. "Marienne, then." "Your Grace," Mrs. Fletcher interjected. "A messenger has arrived from the palace. The Privy Council requests your immediate presence." "Earlier than expected," Ceren observed, his expression hardening. "Valendra's influence at work, no doubt." "What of our plan?" Marienne asked. "If you are detained, proceed as arranged. Thorn will escort you to Lancaster House this evening." He hesitated, then reached into his waistcoat and withdrew a small key. "Should I fail to appear by 8 o'clock, use this. It opens a safe in my study, the one behind the portrait of my father. Inside you'll find evidence sufficient to expose the entire conspiracy. You anticipate arrest. I anticipate all possibilities." His voice softened. "But I do not anticipate defeat." After he departed, Marienne found herself unable to remain still. She paced the chambers, studying the elaborate fiction of her new identity, committing each detail to memory, as though preparing for the most demanding examination of her life. By afternoon, news had reached the house. The Duke of Altair stood before the Privy Council even now, defending himself against accusations that could strip him of title, lands, and liberty. "We've had word from an ally within," Thorn reported, entering the library where Marienne had sequestered herself with histories of the Radenholt family. "His Grace maintains his composure, though the questioning grows increasingly hostile. Have charges been formally brought?" "Not yet, but Lady Valandra has submitted a sworn statement, claiming the Duke orchestrated your escape to prevent you revealing his involvement in treasonous activities." Marienne closed the family history, her decision crystallizing. "We cannot wait until this evening. I must appear before the council now." "Impossible," Thorn protested. "The hearing is closed to all but those directly summoned." "Then I shall claim my right as his wife to stand beside him." She rose, gathering her resolve like armor. "Is that not what a duchess would do?" "It is also what a fugitive seeking capture would do," Thorn countered. His Grace was explicit. The Lancaster House Assembly provides controlled circumstances, witnesses beyond Valandra's immediate influence. By then it may be too late. Marienne moved to the window, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. "Mr. Thorn, when you first examined the forged cipher that condemned me, what convinced you of its falsity?" Pressure points, hesitation marks. The hand that wrote it paused where one fluent in cipher would flow smoothly. "Precisely." She turned to face him. Evidence reveals itself through inconsistency. And what inconsistency exists in Valendra's narrative? Why would a man orchestrate a prison escape only to return to London, knowing he faced investigation? Understanding dawned in Thorne's eyes. It defies logic, unless his purpose transcends self-preservation. Marienne's fingers closed around the brass talisman hidden in her pocket, her own truth carried amid the elaborate fiction of her new identity. The Duke risked everything to prove my innocence. I cannot do less for him. For a moment, Thorne regarded her with scholarly assessment, as though recalculating a complex equation. "Very well," he said finally, "but we shall require a more direct approach than merely appearing at the palace gates." He withdrew a small notebook, penned a swift message, and rang for a footman. "Deliver this to Lord Harrington immediately. Wait for his reply." "Harrington?" Marienne questioned after the footman departed. "I'm unfamiliar with the name." "The Earl of Harrington serves on the Privy Council, and more importantly, he owes His Grace a considerable debt. Years ago, the Duke intervened when Harrington's son faced charges of sedition. The young man was innocent, but evidence had been manufactured against him, as it was against me," Marienne murmured. "Indeed, the pattern becomes increasingly clear." Thorne glanced at the mantel clock. "We have perhaps 2 hours before the council concludes. Enough time if Harrington responds promptly." The reply arrived within 30 minutes, a single line in elegant script. "South entrance, 3:30. Bring proof." Thorne nodded with satisfaction. "We are granted access. Now we must gather our arsenal." He moved to the Duke's desk, unlocked a drawer, and withdrew a sealed envelope. "Affidavits from witnesses at Brackenhaven, testifying to the Countess's unusual interest in your imprisonment. And this." From his waistcoat he produced a folded paper that he handled with special care. A letter in Lady Valendra's hand to a known French agent, discussing the brooch and its contents. His Grace obtained it at considerable risk. "How did he secure such evidence?" Marienne asked, awed by the thoroughness of Ceren's investigation. "I believe," Thorne said carefully, "that his determination stemmed from more than abstract principles of justice. From the moment he read the transcript of your trial, something troubled him. A sense of recognition, perhaps. Recognition. The Duke's own father was once falsely accused of misappropriating Crown funds. Though eventually exonerated, the ordeal broke his health. He died knowing his name had been tarnished, even temporarily." Thorne's voice softened. "His Grace was 17 when he inherited the title, a boy forced to become a man overnight, defending a legacy under shadow." The revelation shifted something in Marienne's understanding of Ceren, this stern, principled man whose pursuit of justice stemmed not from abstract nobility, but from intimate knowledge of injustice's wounds. As the mantel clock chimed 3, Mrs. Fletcher entered with a black velvet cloak lined in deep blue silk. "For Her Grace," she announced, draping it carefully over Marienne's shoulders. "The falcon pin secures it thus." Her weathered hands fastened the platinum clasp at Marienne's throat. "There, now you truly look the Duchess." "Thank you," Marienne said, touched by the woman's care, "though I fear I may dishonor the title before day's end." "Nonsense." The housekeeper stepped back, her assessment frank. "His Grace chose well, even if the circumstances are unconventional." Before Marienne could respond to this startling vote of confidence, Thorne announced that their carriage awaited. The journey to Whitehall passed in tense silence, rain drumming against the carriage roof like anxious fingers. At precisely 3:30, they arrived at a modest entrance on the palace's southern facade. A tall figure awaited them beneath a black umbrella, Lord Harrington, his craggy features betraying nothing as he escorted them through corridors of power few commoners ever witnessed. "The council concludes in 20 minutes, he informed them in hushed tones. "Lady Valendra has presented what she claims is definitive proof of conspiracy." "And the Duke's response?" Marienne asked, her heart racing beneath the velvet cloak. "Composed, but increasingly cornered. The evidence, while circumstantial, forms a compelling narrative." Harrington glanced at her, curiosity evident beneath his formal manner. "His Grace made no mention of a wife." "Our marriage remained private for diplomatic reasons," she replied smoothly, the fiction now feeling strangely natural. "But I cannot remain silent while my husband faces false accusations." They halted before massive oak doors. Beyond them, voices rose and fell in the measured cadences of power. "I can grant you entrance," Harrington said, "but after that, you stand alone. The council tolerates no interruptions." Marienne straightened, the falcon pin gleaming at her throat. Then we shall ensure our interruption proves worth their tolerance. The Privy Council chamber breathed ancient authority, oak-panelled walls bearing the weight of centuries, massive portraits of monarchs overlooking proceedings as though still judging from beyond the grave. A long table dominated the centre, around which sat 12 men in formal attire, their expressions ranging from bored indifference to predatory interest. At the table's head stood Lady Valendra Morn, her burgundy silk gown a deliberate echo of spilled blood against the chamber's sombre tones. She was speaking, her gloved hands gesturing toward documents spread before the council members. As you can see, gentlemen, the cipher matches precisely those found in the Duke's private correspondence. The conclusion is inescapable. Opposite her, at the table's foot, stood Ceren Altair. Though he maintained perfect posture, subtle signs of strain showed in the tightness around his eyes, the whiteness of his knuckles as he gripped the back of his chair. "The cipher proves nothing beyond someone's ability to mimic my hand," he was saying as the doors opened. "I demand independent verification by—" He stopped abruptly, as all eyes turned toward the entrance. Marienne felt those stares like physical touch as she advanced into the chamber, Thorn a respectful step behind. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" demanded Lord Blackwood, the council's senior member, his heavy jowls flushing with indignation. "Forgive the intrusion, my lords," Marienne replied, executing a perfect curtsy despite her thundering heart. "I am Lady Marienne Altair, Duchess of Radenholt. I come bearing evidence critical to these proceedings." Silence fell, broken only by Valendra's sharp intake of breath. The Countess recovered quickly, her amber eyes narrowing to feline slits. "Preposterous," she declared. "The Duke is unmarried. This woman is clearly an impostor. Indeed, she bears striking resemblance to the escaped convict, Marienne Solvryn." "A resemblance Lady Valendra is uniquely positioned to note," Marienne responded, having visited said convict multiple times, most recently to extort a false confession. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ceren's expression remained impassive, but his eyes conveyed volumes as they met hers. Surprise, admiration, and something warmer that quickened her pulse. Lord Blackwood banged a gavel. "Order! Lady, or whoever you claim to be, these proceedings are closed to all but those directly summoned." "Then I petition to be heard as one directly affected," Marienne countered, moving forward with measured confidence. "My husband stands accused of treason based on evidence manufactured by Lady Valendra Morn, evidence I can prove false." "Bold claims from a woman who appears from nowhere," Valendra interjected, her voice silken with contempt. "Where is this supposed proof of yours, or does it exist solely in your imagination like your marriage?" Thorn stepped forward, presenting the portfolio to Lord Blackwood. "Marriage certificate duly registered in Vienna. Letters of introduction from the Baroness Kessler, and most pertinently evidence of Lady Valendra's correspondence with French agents regarding the stolen brooch." "Lies," Valendra hissed. "Forgeries." "Indeed, forgery is central to this matter," Marienne agreed, her voice steady despite the tension coiling through her. "Mr. Thorn, please explain to the Council your findings regarding the cipher attributed to me, to Marienne Solvryn." Thorn approached the table, his scholarly demeanor lending weight to his words. "Upon expert examination, the cipher alleged to be in Miss Solvryn's hand shows classic signs of forgery, hesitation marks where one fluent would write smoothly, pressure inconsistencies indicating conscious imitation rather than natural writing. More importantly," Marienne continued, "the document itself contains an anomaly overlooked at trial. The watermark dates from 1851, 2 years after the paper was allegedly used." Lord Harrington leaned forward. "Is this verified?" "Easily verifiable," Thorn confirmed. "I have prepared a demonstration with similar paper from the same mill." As attention focused on Thorn's evidence, Marienne circled the table, moving deliberately towards Ceren. When she reached his side, she placed her hand on his arm, a gesture both intimate and supportive, exactly as a wife might offer her husband in his hour of need. "A bold gambit," he murmured, for her ears alone. "Learned from the boldest," she returned softly. Valendra observed their exchange with growing alarm. "This charade is absurd," she declared. "The woman is an escaped convict, and the Duke her accomplice. I demand she be arrested immediately." "On what authority, Lady Valendra?" Ceren countered, his voice gaining strength. "You stand before the Privy Council without official position, presenting evidence now revealed as suspect. Furthermore," Marienne added, withdrawing a final document from her cloak, "we present the sworn testimony of Agnes Fletcher, kitchen maid at Brackenhaven, who witnessed Lady Valandra offering rewards to guards willing to plant evidence in Miss Solvryn's cell. Valandra's composure cracked. "The word of a servant against mine? I am Countess Morn." "And I," said Ceren quietly, "am Duke of Radenholt, descendant of 7 generations who served the crown with honor. Yet you sought to destroy that legacy for personal vengeance." "Vengeance?" Lord Blackwood echoed, his brow furrowing. "Lady Valandra proposed marriage 3 seasons past," Ceren explained, his tone matter-of-fact. "When declined, she vowed consequences. I thought little of it then. Wounded pride speaks harshly but heals. I was mistaken." "This is outrageous," Valandra protested, though her voice had lost its silken assurance. "My lord, surely you cannot credit such tales." "I credit evidence, Lady Valandra," Blackwood replied gravely, "and the evidence before us raises troubling questions about your motivations and methods." As though sensing the tide's turn, Valandra changed tactics, her voice softening to vulnerability. "My lords, I have served the crown faithfully. These accusations stem from a personal dispute that has no bearing on the facts. The Duke rejected me, yes, a humiliation I endured with dignity. But to suggest I would commit treason for mere revenge insults both my honor and your intelligence." "Perhaps," interjected a new voice from the doorway, "additional testimony might clarify matters." All eyes turned to find Reverend Blackwell, Brackenhaven's chaplain, accompanied by a slight man whose nervous gaze darted around the chamber. "Ceren Dusk," Ceren identified him. "Lady Valandra's assistant, reported missing these 3 weeks past." "Not missing," the man corrected, his voice thin but determined. "Hidden, by my own choice, after witnessing matters that threatened my conscience." Valandra's face drained of color. "Ceren, what foolishness is this? Return to your duties at once." "My duty is to truth, my lady." He approached the table, trembling yet resolute. "I have served the Countess for 8 years. In that time, I transcribed her correspondence, including letters to a Monsieur Renaud regarding the exchange of naval documents hidden within a bronze brooch." The chamber erupted in exclamations. Lord Blackwood banged his gavel repeatedly until order returned. "These are serious allegations," he pronounced. "If true, they constitute treason not by the Duke, but by Lady Valandra herself." "They are true," Ceren affirmed, "and I have kept copies of the most damning letters secured with a solicitor to be released upon my death. Insurance against the Countess's retribution." Valandra's practiced composure finally shattered. "You ingrate," she spat. "After all I've done for you, including ordering me to plant the brooch among Miss Solvryn's possessions," he finished quietly, "a sin for which I can never fully atone, but might begin to address through honesty now." The council chamber fell silent as the full implications settled over the assembly. Then Lord Blackwood rose, his authority filling the space. "In light of this testimony, I move that Lady Valandra Morn be detained pending full investigation of these charges. All accusations against the Duke of Altair are suspended." He fixed Marienne with a penetrating stare. "As for you, madam, your status remains unclear." "If I may, my lord," Ceren intervened smoothly, "my wife's intervention today has proven invaluable to the Crown's interests. Whatever questions surround our unorthodox marriage, surely they pale beside the service rendered." Blackwood studied them both, his weathered features revealing nothing. "Very well. The Council will reconvene tomorrow to formalize these proceedings. Until then, the Duke and his Duchess remain under official observation, but not detention." His gaze hardened as it turned to Valandra. "The Countess, however, will enjoy the hospitality of the Tower tonight." As guards escorted a pale, seething Valandra from the chamber, Marienne felt the tension that had sustained her beginning to ebb. She swayed slightly, and found Ceren's arm instantly around her waist, supportive yet proper even now. "You risked everything," he murmured as they exited the chamber together. "Why?" She looked up at him, this stern, honorable man who had become her unexpected champion. "Because you taught me that truth without courage is cowardice," she answered simply, "and because some risks reveal their worth only in the taking." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a revelation. But before he could respond, they were surrounded by council members offering guarded congratulations, servants bringing cloaks, and the ceaseless machinery of power adjusting to this sudden realignment. The moment passed, leaving Marienne to wonder what truth had almost been spoken and whether they would find another opportunity for such honesty between them. Evening descended upon London in veils of amber and indigo, gas lamps igniting like earthbound stars along rain-washed streets, Within Radenholt House, silence had settled after hours of frantic activity, messengers arriving and departing, solicitors conferring in hushed tones, servants preparing for what would undoubtedly be the most scrutinized social appearance of the season. In her chambers, Marienne sat before the dressing table as Mrs. Fletcher arranged her hair for the Lancaster House Assembly. Despite Valendra's detention, their attendance remained necessary, a public declaration of innocence and union. The sapphires, I think, Mrs. Fletcher decided, opening a velvet case to reveal a diamond and sapphire tiara that caught lamplight like captured stars. They match your gown and befit a duchess making her first appearance. They're magnificent, Marienne murmured, watching as the housekeeper secured the piece among her dark curls, though I fear they outshine the wearer. Nonsense! Fine jewels merely accentuate what already exists. Mrs. Fletcher stepped back, her assessment clinical yet approving. There, you'll do His Grace proud tonight. When the housekeeper departed, Marienne remained seated, studying her reflection. The woman in the mirror was both stranger and self, adorned as befitted her temporary station, yet carrying the same soul that had endured Brackenhaven's cold stones. The sapphire gown with its silver embroidery, the tiara, the duchess's ring upon her finger, all borrowed plumage, yet somehow not entirely false. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation. Expecting Thorn with final instructions for the evening, she called permission to enter. Instead, Ceren himself appeared, resplendent in formal evening attire, white gloves emphasizing the strength of his hands. "Your Grace," she acknowledged, rising to curtsy. "Please, no formalities between us." "Not here." He hesitated, then stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. "I've come to thank you for today. Your courage before the council was remarkable." "I merely followed the example you set," she replied, though I confess I had not anticipated quite such dramatic consequences. Nor had I. A smile ghosted across his features, rare enough that Marienne found herself cataloguing it like a precious sighting. Valendra remains in custody. Her homes are being searched for additional evidence. And Ceren? Will he face charges for his role? His testimony secured him leniency. He'll be questioned further, but likely pardoned in exchange for continued cooperation. Ceren moved to the window, gazing out at the gathering darkness. "The council has requested our presence tomorrow to formalize their findings." The statement hung between them, its implications clear. Tomorrow would bring not only Valendra's official disgrace, but the necessary unraveling of their pretense. The temporary duchess would disappear as suddenly as she had materialized. "I shall be prepared," Marienne assured him, though something in her chest tightened at the thought. "Once my name is cleared, I can return to teaching," he suggested, turning to face her. "Resume the life interrupted by Valendra's scheme." "That was my intention." She smoothed the sapphire silk of her gown, a gesture to occupy suddenly restless hands. "Though I imagine my prospects are somewhat diminished after imprisonment." "They needn't be." He approached, stopping a respectful distance away. "I've been authorized to offer you compensation for wrongful conviction, a substantial sum sufficient to establish independence wherever you might wish." "How very practical," Marienne observed, unsure why the offer, generous by any measure, left her feeling hollow. "I am grateful for your advocacy in this matter as well." "Marienne." Her name in his voice drew her gaze upward. "There is another possibility I wish to propose." "Another temporary arrangement?" she asked lightly, though her pulse quickened. "No." His eyes held hers, their usual steely reserve softened to something almost vulnerable, one considerably more permanent. Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. "You cannot mean—" "I do." He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I ask you to remain as Duchess of Radenholt, not in pretense, but in truth." Marienne stared at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, yet holding hers with careful reverence. "Why would you offer this? Your name is nearly restored, your position secure. You've no need for a marriage of convenience now." "Convenience plays no role in my proposal." He released one of her hands to lift her chin, ensuring she met his gaze. "You faced the Privy Council without flinching. You risked everything to defend truth and me, when most would have seized freedom at any price. Such courage, such principle, these are qualities I had ceased to believe existed." "You speak of admiration, not love," she said softly. "Do I?" His thumb traced the curve of her cheek, the gesture achingly gentle. "Then let me speak more plainly. When I first read the transcript of your trial, something in your words called to me, an echo of my own experience with injustice. I pursued your case from principle, yes, but I continued from growing personal interest. He released her, stepping back as though to give her space to consider his words. Each new discovery confirmed my instinct. Each interaction deepened my respect. And today, watching you stand before those powerful men unbroken and unbowed, I knew with absolute certainty. Knew what? She whispered, hardly daring to breathe. That I could search a lifetime and never find your equal. His voice dropped lower, intimate in the lamplight. That the thought of you walking away tomorrow fills me with a dread greater than any I faced before the council. Marienne's heart thundered against her ribs. This stern, principled man, this duke who had risked everything to prove her innocence, now offered his heart alongside his name. It seemed impossible, yet his eyes held nothing but sincerity. Ceren, she began, his given name still unfamiliar on her lips. The world would never understand. A duke and a governess? The world need never know our beginning, he countered. To society, you are already my duchess, wed in Vienna months ago. Only we, Thorn, and a handful of servants know otherwise. Deception seems a poor foundation for marriage, she observed, though her objection lacked conviction. Not deception. Privacy. The truth of how we found each other belongs to us alone. He took her hand again, his touch warming her to her core. I do not ask for immediate answer. Consider until tomorrow, if you wish. Marienne studied him, this man who had become the unexpected center of her world. Stern yet just, powerful yet gentle, he had seen value in her when all others saw only convenient guilt. I need no further time, she said, her decision crystallizing with sudden clarity. My answer is yes. Joy transformed his features, erasing the habitual gravity that had marked him since their first meeting. In its place bloomed something Marienne recognized as the man beneath the ducal mantle, the true Ceren Altair, seen perhaps by few. Then, Lady Altair, he said, bringing her hand to his lips, shall we attend Lancaster House and introduce the ton to its newest duchess? With one condition, she replied, emboldened by the happiness evident in his eyes, that before we face society, you kiss your bride as a husband should. For a moment, he appeared startled by her forthrightness. Then he smiled, a full, genuine expression that transformed his entire countenance. A condition I accept with pleasure. He drew her gently into his arms, one hand cradling her face with exquisite care. When his lips met hers, the kiss was neither hesitant nor demanding, but perfectly balanced, like the man himself, controlled yet deeply passionate. Marienne felt herself melting into him, her hands finding their way to his shoulders as the kiss deepened. This was no performance for society's benefit, no calculated gesture. This was truth, pure and unvarnished. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Ceren rested his forehead against hers. I've imagined that since the moment you stood before me in Brackenhaven, defiant despite your chains, and I, since you told me truth, shall walk beside me, she admitted, though I scarcely dared acknowledge it, even to myself. A knock at the door reluctantly separated them. Thorn's voice announced that their carriage awaited. Shall we, Duchess? Ceren offered his arm, every inch the aristocrat once more, save for the warmth lingering in his eyes. Indeed, Your Grace. She placed her hand on his arm, feeling the strength beneath the formal attire. Let us show London that justice like truth prevails when courage stands beside it. As they descended the grand staircase, Marienne felt the brass talisman tucked safely in a hidden pocket of her gown. Its presence grounded her amid the splendor, a reminder of the path that had led her from prison cell to ducal mansion, from solitary struggle to unexpected love. Tonight, they would face society as Duke and Duchess, a calculated appearance to cement their victory over Valendra's schemes. Tomorrow they would face the Privy Council to formalize Marienne's exoneration and the Countess's disgrace. But beyond that lay something neither had anticipated when their paths first crossed, a shared future built not on pretense but on the rarest foundation of all, mutual respect transformed by adversity into enduring love. Lancaster House blazed with light, its grand facade illuminated against the night sky as carriages deposited London's elite upon its marble steps. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, gilded mirrors multiplying the brilliance until the very air seemed infused with golden light. Ladies in silks and satins circled like exotic birds, gentlemen in formal black created islands of sobriety amid the kaleidoscope of color. At precisely 9 o'clock, the major domo struck his staff against the parquet floor. "His Grace the Duke of Radenholt," he announced, his voice carrying above the orchestral strains, "and Her Grace the Duchess of Radenholt." Conversation faltered as heads turned toward the grand staircase. Ceren descended first, every inch the aristocrat in his formal attire, his bearing regal yet approachable, a calculated balance he had perfected through years of navigating society's treacherous waters. Behind him, her hand resting lightly upon his offered arm, came Marienne. The sapphire gown shimmered as she moved, its subtle silver embroidery catching the light with each step. The tiara nestled among her dark curls reflected prismatic sparks, but it was her expression, serene confidence tempered with quiet dignity, that commanded attention. "Extraordinary," murmured Lady Harrington to her companion. "They said she was a foreign bride, but I'd heard nothing of such a match." "The Duke has been abroad for ages," replied Lord Wexley. "Continental connections, no doubt, though one wonders at the timing given today's Privy Council drama." Whispers rippled through the assembly as the couple reached the ballroom floor. Some guests stepped forward to offer congratulations, curiosity thinly veiled beneath social niceties. Others maintained a cautious distance, uncertain where favor would ultimately settle in the wake of Valendra's spectacular fall. "Your Grace," Lady Pembroke approached, her daughters in tow. "What a delightful surprise. We had no notion you had taken a bride." "A private ceremony in Vienna," Ceren replied smoothly. "My wife's Austrian connections made an intimate wedding more practical than London festivities." "How continental," Lady Pembroke observed, her gaze assessing Marienne with unconcealed interest. "And how fortuitous that Her Grace arrived in London precisely when you faced such troubling accusations." "Fortune favors the just, Lady Pembroke," Marienne responded, her voice gentle yet firm. As today's proceedings demonstrated, before the matron could frame a suitable reply, Lord Blackwood appeared at their side. "Your Graces," he greeted them with a formal bow. "The Privy Council extends its felicitations on your marriage and its appreciation for Her Grace's timely intervention today." The public acknowledgement from the Council's senior member rippled through the ballroom like wind across a wheat field. Those who had maintained cautious distance now gravitated closer, social instinct recognizing the shift in power. "You navigate these waters admirably," Ceren murmured as they circulated through the crowd. "One would think you born to the title." "I observe and adapt," Marienne replied, acknowledging greetings with practiced grace. "Skills honed through years of governessing, though I confess the stakes were somewhat lower when managing unruly children." His soft laughter warmed her more than any formal approval could have. "I doubt that. Society merely employs different weapons than the nursery." As the evening progressed, Marienne found herself the center of a growing circle of curiosity. Ladies inquired about her Austrian family, her wedding ceremony, her impressions of London. She answered each query with careful truth, wrapped in deliberate vagueness, a technique borrowed from Ceren's own diplomatic arsenal. "Your Grace must join us for tea on Thursday," insisted Lady Riverton, society's most formidable hostess. "My literary circle would benefit immensely from continental perspective." "You are most kind," Marienne replied, "though I fear my schedule remains somewhat uncertain until matters are fully resolved." Of course. This dreadful business with Lady Valendra." Lady Riverton lowered her voice to a dramatic whisper. "They say she'll be transported to Australia. Can you imagine? A countess among convicts." The irony nearly broke Marienne's composure. "Justice makes strange companions of us all," she managed, catching Ceren's eye across the room. He excused himself from his own conversation and moved to her side with the precision of a dancer anticipating his partner's needs. "If you'll forgive us, Lady Riverton, I believe they're preparing for the first waltz. My wife has promised me this dance." As he led her toward the center of the ballroom, Marienne released a carefully controlled breath. "Thank you for the rescue." Lady Riverton's speculation regarding convicts nearly undid me. "You've maintained remarkable composure," he assured her, his hand warm against the small of her back as they took their positions. "Though perhaps we might depart after this dance. Tomorrow brings the formal council hearing, and tonight has served its purpose." The orchestra struck the opening chords of Strauss's Emperor Waltz. Ceren's arm encircled her waist, his other hand clasping hers with strength and surety. As they began to move, Marienne felt the eyes of the assembly upon them, this first public dance between the Duke and his mysterious bride. Years of instruction in continental deportment served Marienne well as they glided across the polished floor. Ceren led with fluid confidence, his steps perfectly matched to hers, as though they had danced together 100 times before. In this moment at least, their pretense approached truth, two figures moving in perfect harmony, the rhythm between them as natural as breath. "I never thanked you properly," Marienne said softly as they turned beneath the chandeliers. "For what, precisely?" "For believing in my innocence, when all evidence argued otherwise. For risking everything to uncover truth." His hand tightened almost imperceptibly around hers. "I recognized something in you from the beginning, a quality I've rarely encountered, integrity without artifice, strength without cruelty." "You speak as though these qualities are extraordinary," she observed, "yet you embody them yourself. Perhaps that is why we recognized each other so readily." The music swelled around them as he guided her through a graceful turn. Two souls tempered by similar fires. As the waltz concluded, they held position for a moment longer than strictly necessary, reluctant to break the connection that had formed between them. When they finally parted, Marienne felt the absence of his touch as tangibly as she had felt his presence. Their departure from Lancaster House proceeded with the same calculated dignity that had marked their entrance. Farewells were exchanged, invitations acknowledged, congratulations accepted with gracious reserve. By the time their carriage rolled away from the illuminated mansion, Marienne felt drained yet oddly exhilarated, as though she had passed some critical test whose parameters she had only begun to understand. "You were magnificent tonight," Ceren said, as they travelled through London's darkened streets. "The Tun is thoroughly convinced of our union." "For tonight, perhaps," she replied, watching raindrops trace silver paths down the carriage window. "Tomorrow brings new scrutiny." "Tomorrow brings vindication," he corrected gently. "The council will formalize your exoneration. Valendra's disgrace will be complete." "And our arrangement?" Marienne turned to face him, the carriage's gentle swaying bringing them momentarily closer. "Will the council inquire into the legitimacy of our supposed Viennese wedding?" Ceren's expression grew serious in the passing lamplight. "I've made arrangements to address that matter privately with Lord Blackwood. A special license can be obtained without public announcement. Our marriage can be made legitimate before any questions arise." "So practical," Marienne observed, a smile softening her words, "always anticipating contingencies. A habit formed early and reinforced often." He hesitated, then reached across to take her hand. "Though I find myself hoping this particular contingency proves unnecessary." "How so?" "I meant what I said earlier, Marienne. My proposal was not merely expedient resolution to our dilemma." His thumb traced small circles against her gloved palm. "I wish our marriage to begin not from necessity, but from mutual choice." The tenderness in his voice, so different from the stern authority he presented to the world, stirred something profound within her. This man who had risked everything to prove her innocence now risked his heart as well, offering not merely his name, but his future. "Then let us choose each other properly," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion welling beneath. "Not as duke and governess, not as rescuer and rescued, but as Ceren and Marienne, two souls who found truth in the midst of deception." His smile in the half-darkness transformed his face, erasing the weight of responsibility he carried so constantly. For the first time since she had known him, he appeared truly unburdened, almost boyish in his evident happiness. "Tomorrow, then," he said, raising her hand to his lips. "After the council hearing we shall speak our vows properly, with truth as our only witness." As the carriage approached Radenholt House, Marienne felt the brass talisman in her pocket, her mother's final gift, her anchor through imprisonment, a reminder of identity when all else shifted. Tomorrow she would set it aside, not as rejection of her past but as acceptance of her future, a future chosen rather than imposed, built on foundations stronger than circumstance. The house awaited them, windows glowing with welcome light against the London darkness. For tonight it remained her temporary shelter. Tomorrow it would become her home, not through pretense or necessity, but through the most unexpected gift of all, love born from justice's pursuit. Morning arrived draped in pearl-grey mist, the Thames a silver ribbon winding through London's awakening streets. Within Radenholt House, preparations for the day proceeded with measured precision, breakfast served precisely at 8, correspondence attended to by 9, the Duke's carriage ordered for 10:30 to convey them to the Privy Council's chambers. Marienne sat in the morning room, a cup of untouched tea cooling before her as she reviewed the affidavits Thorne had prepared. Today's hearing would formalize her exoneration and Valendra's disgrace, the culmination of weeks of struggle, the restoration of a name she had feared permanently tarnished. "Your Grace," Mrs. Fletcher appeared at the doorway, her expression uncharacteristically troubled. "A messenger has arrived from Whitehall. His lordship requests your immediate presence in the study." Something in the housekeeper's tone set Marienne's nerves on edge. "Has there been word from the council? A change in the proceedings?" "His Grace did not share details, my lady, but the messenger awaits your response regarding alternative arrangements." Alternative arrangements. The phrase carried ominous weight. Setting aside the affidavits, Marienne made her way to Ceren's study, anxiety gathering with each step. When she entered, she found him standing before the fireplace, expression grave as he studied a document in his hands. Thorne sat at the desk, pen poised over official-looking papers. "Ceren," she ventured, the use of his given name still unfamiliar on her lips. "What has happened?" He looked up, his features softening momentarily before resolution reasserted itself. "Developments overnight," he said, handing her the document. "Read this." The letter bore the Privy Council's seal. "To His Grace the Duke of Radenholt. It has come to the Council's attention that certain irregularities exist regarding your marriage documentation. While this matter might ordinarily be addressed through ecclesiastical courts, the timing coincident with the Solvryn case raises questions that must be resolved prior to today's proceedings. Attendance by both your Grace and the lady claiming the title of Duchess is required at 11 o'clock precisely. With highest regard, Lord James Blackwood, Privy Council." "They've discovered the truth," Marienne said quietly, handing the letter back. "Our Viennese marriage was too convenient to escape scrutiny." "Not necessarily," Thorne interjected, gesturing to the papers before him. "The records are impeccable. More likely, Valendra's remaining allies seek to discredit your testimony by questioning your identity. Regardless of source, the challenge must be addressed." Ceren's expression remained composed, though tension lined his shoulders. "We have 3 options before us." "I'm listening," Marienne replied, matching his pragmatism despite the fear unfurling within her. "First, we maintain our fiction. The documentation will withstand cursory examination, though deeper investigation might eventually reveal inconsistencies. And the second option, we acknowledge the deception, but argue necessity, an emergency measure to counter Valendra's machinations. This preserves your exoneration while accepting certain consequences for the false claim. The implication hung unspoken: disgrace for her, possible censure for him, their victory tainted by the methods employed to achieve it. "The third option?" she asked, though she suspected its nature already. "We formalize our arrangement immediately." Ceren indicated the papers on Thorne's desk. "Special license, private ceremony, witnessed and registered before the hearing. Not a fictitious union from Vienna, but a legitimate marriage contracted this morning. Marrying mere hours before facing the council would hardly seem less convenient than our Viennese fiction," she observed. "Perhaps, but it would be truth rather than fabrication." He approached, taking her hands in his. "Marienne, I promised you a choice, a marriage entered freely rather than from necessity. These circumstances deny us that luxury." She studied him, this man who had become the axis around which her world now turned. His expression revealed the conflict within, the desire to protect her, warring with his promise to honor her agency. "What do you advise?" she asked softly. "I cannot advise in this." His voice matched her quietness. "My own wishes cloud my judgment too thoroughly." "And what are those wishes?" His hands tightened around hers. "That you become my wife in truth, not from expediency, not from gratitude, but from the same recognition I feel when I look at you, that we face the council and the world united by choice, rather than circumstance." The raw honesty in his voice stirred something profound within her. This proud, principled man stood before her not as her rescuer or protector, but as her equal, offering partnership rather than sanctuary. "Then let us choose option 3, she said, decision crystallizing with sudden clarity, "not because necessity demands it, but because my heart has already made its selection." Relief and joy transformed his features. "You are certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything," she smiled, squeezing his hands, "though I confess, this is not quite the romantic ceremony I had imagined." "The romance lies not in the ceremony, but in the commitment," he replied, raising her hand to his lips. "Though I shall endeavor to provide more conventional romance once this business is concluded." Thorne cleared his throat discreetly. "If I might interrupt this touching scene, we have precisely 40 minutes before the special license must be registered. The chaplain awaits in the library." What followed unfolded with the efficient grace that characterized all operations within Radenholt House. In the library, beneath portraits of Ceren's ancestors, Reverend Blackwell, The prison chaplain who had facilitated Marienne's escape conducted a brief but solemn ceremony. Thorne stood as witness, alongside Mrs. Fletcher, whose usual stoicism cracked to reveal unmistakable approval. Marienne wore no wedding gown, merely the mourning dress of grey silk she had donned for the council hearing. Ceren wore his formal attire, the platinum pin securing his cravat the only concession to the occasion's significance. The vows were traditional, their simplicity lending weight rather than diminishing their impact. I, Ceren James Radenholt, take thee, Marienne Elizabeth Solvryn, to be my wedded wife. His voice remained steady, though his eyes conveyed emotions beyond the formal words: promise and protection, respect and desire, all bound together in the sacred pledge. I, Marienne Elizabeth Solvryn, take thee, Ceren James Radenholt, to be my wedded husband. As she spoke the ancient words, Marienne felt their significance resonating through her very being. This was no pretense, no expedient arrangement, but the consecration of a bond forged in adversity and tempered by shared purpose. When Ceren slipped the platinum and sapphire ring, no longer a prop but a symbol of genuine commitment, onto her finger, she felt its weight not as burden but as anchor. And when Reverend Blackwell pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared held no hesitation, no reservation, only the certainty of two souls who had found in each other an unexpected home. "The documents are complete," Thorne announced as they signed the register. "Legally binding and properly witnessed. I shall convey copies to the council chambers immediately." "Not quite yet," Ceren said, his arm still encircling Marienne's waist. "There is one final matter to address." From his waistcoat, he withdrew a small scroll tied with the Radenholt seal. "This grants full exoneration to Marienne Solvryn, signed by Lord Blackwood himself, to be entered into public record regardless of today's proceedings." Marienne stared at the document, its significance momentarily beyond comprehension. "How did you secure this?" "When?" "Last night after we returned from Lancaster House, I met privately with Blackwood, presented the final evidence, and obtained his authorization." Ceren's expression was both tender and triumphant. "Your name is restored, Marienne. Whatever challenges we face today, your innocence is officially recognized." Emotion welled within her, gratitude, relief, and a love so powerful it threatened to overwhelm her composure. This final gesture, this absolute assurance of her redemption, secured before their marriage, removed any lingering doubt about his motives. "You ensured my exoneration would stand independent of our union," she said, understanding dawning, "so I could choose freely, without fear that rejecting your proposal might jeopardize my freedom. I would have no wife who came to me from necessity rather than desire," he replied simply. "Your choice had to be truly yours." For a moment, Marienne could not speak, her heart too full for words. This man, who had risked everything to prove her innocence, had taken one final risk, offering her complete freedom even at the cost of losing her. "My lord," Thorne interrupted reluctantly, "the carriage awaits. The council will not tolerate tardiness, even from newlyweds." Reality reasserted itself. The Privy Council, Valendra's allies, the questions that remained to be answered. Yet as they prepared to depart, Marienne felt a certainty that transcended circumstance. Whatever challenges awaited at Whitehall, they would face them together, not as duke and governess, not as rescuer and rescued, but as husband and wife, bound by choice rather than necessity. As they entered the carriage, Marienne reached into her pocket and withdrew the brass talisman that had been her companion through imprisonment and uncertainty. For a moment, she held it in her palm, its familiar weight a connection to all that had brought her to this moment. "A keepsake?" Ceren inquired, noting her contemplation. "My mother's final gift," she explained, "a reminder that even in darkness, one might find one's way home." She smiled, closing her fingers around the small token. "Though I believe I have found that home at last." His hand covered hers, warm and strong. "Not the end of your journey," he said softly, "but perhaps the beginning of one we shall travel together." As their carriage moved through London's misty streets toward Whitehall, toward whatever final reckoning awaited them, Marienne felt a peace that transcended the uncertainty ahead. For the first time since Brackenhaven's iron doors had closed behind her, she looked toward the future not with fear but with hope, not as a woman condemned by another's crime, but as a duchess whose truth had finally prevailed. 5 years passed, seasons turning like pages in a well-loved book, each bringing its own chapter to the story of Radenholt House and its occupants. Spring blossoms gave way to summer abundance, autumn's golden mantle yielded to winter's silver stillness, and through it all the house stood as it had for centuries, now vibrant with new life, new purpose, new love. On a crisp December evening, snow drifted past leaded windows, transforming the grounds into a landscape of crystalline beauty. Within the library, firelight cast dancing shadows across walnut paneling as Marienne sat in a deep armchair, a leather-bound volume open upon her lap. 5 years as Duchess of Radenholt had altered her subtly. Confidence had deepened into quiet authority. The wariness born of injustice softened into compassionate wisdom. "Mamma!" a small voice interrupted her reading as the library door swung open. 4-year-old James Alexander Radenholt, heir to the dukedom and terror of the nursery staff, bounded across the carpet, dark curls tumbling over bright grey eyes, his father's eyes in a face that otherwise mirrored her own. "Aunt Thea says you have a special visitor," Marienne smiled, setting aside her book to gather her son into her arms. "Does she indeed? And did Aunt Thea also mention that young dukes should knock before entering rooms?" "I forgot," he admitted without contrition. "But it's important. The visitor has a big hat with feathers and gloves like Papa's, and she asked for you specially. Then I suppose I must investigate this feathered phenomenon." She rose, straightening the folds of her emerald silk gown, a far cry from the prison grey that had once been her daily attire, yet worn with the same inherent dignity that had first drawn Ceren's attention. In the drawing-room she found Thea Fletcher, Agnes's younger sister, now Radenholt's head housekeeper, serving tea to a woman whose elegant appearance confirmed James's description. The visitor rose as Marienne entered, revealing a face once familiar, now altered by time and circumstance. "Lady Valendra," Marienne acknowledged, her composure perfect despite the shock of recognition. "This is unexpected." 5 years had transformed the former Countess Morn. The luxurious beauty that had once commanded society's admiration had hardened into something more brittle. Her burgundy traveling costume, though expensive, showed signs of wear. Her bearing remained proud, but carried a new wariness. "Your Grace," Valendra curtsied, the gesture technically correct yet somehow hollow. "I appreciate your receiving me without prior arrangement." "You've travelled far," Marienne observed, taking the chair opposite. "Australia, if I recall correctly. Tasmania." A ghost of the old bitterness flickered across Valendra's features. "Though my residency requirements concluded last year, I've been travelling since." The careful phrasing acknowledged what both women understood. Valendra had served her sentence for treason, reduced from execution to transportation through the intervention of powerful family connections. "What brings you to London?" Marienne asked, accepting a cup of tea from Thea. "Surely not merely social calls upon old acquaintances." "Not merely, no." Valendra's gloved fingers tightened around her cup. "I have business matters to resolve before departing for America. New beginnings require certain conclusions. And you consider me among those conclusions?" In a manner of speaking, the former countess set down her tea, meeting Marienne's gaze directly. "I have come to offer something you may find unexpected." "Indeed?" "An apology." The words emerged with evident difficulty, as though extracted through force of will. "What I did to you was unconscionable, not merely criminal, but cruel." Marienne's composure faltered momentarily, the sincerity in Valendra's voice catching her unprepared. "You've had 5 years to reflect upon your actions." 5 years in a penal colony provides ample opportunity for reflection. "Yes." A mirthless smile touched Valendra's lips. "Though I confess, acceptance came only gradually. Anger sustained me far longer than was wise." "Anger toward whom?" "Toward your husband, initially. Then toward you, eventually toward myself." She smoothed her gloves, a gesture reminiscent of her former elegance. "The woman who orchestrated your imprisonment would scarcely recognize the woman sitting before you now." "People change," Marienne acknowledged, studying the face that had once represented all she feared. "Sometimes through choice, sometimes through circumstance, sometimes through both." Valendra hesitated, then reached into her reticule and withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue. "I've brought something that belongs to you, or rather, belonged to your mother." Marienne accepted the package with wary curiosity. Unwrapping the tissue revealed a brass talisman identical to the one she had carried through imprisonment, the one now safely preserved in her jewelry case, a reminder of the journey that had led her to Radenholt. "How did you come by this?" "Your mother possessed a pair," Valendra explained. "One she gave to you, the other she entrusted to my mother for safekeeping during her final illness. It was among my mother's effects when she died, shortly before I implemented my scheme against you." "You knew my mother." Marienne's world tilted. past and present, realigning into patterns she had never suspected. "I knew of her," Valendra corrected. "Our mothers were companions at finishing school. When yours married beneath her station, a choice my mother considered romantic folly, they maintained correspondence nonetheless. Upon your mother's death, my mother assumed a distant guardianship over you. Understanding dawned like winter sunrise, gradual yet transformative. The governess position with the family connected to Radenholt was arranged through my mother's influence, yes." Valendra's expression revealed complex emotion, regret tinged with lingering pride. "The irony is exquisite, is it not? I used my family's connection to position you where I could later frame you, never suspecting that in doing so, I delivered you directly to the man who would become your champion and husband." The revelations settled over Marienne like falling snow, each flake of truth accumulating into profound realization. "You believe there was purpose in this path. I believe in consequences, Your Grace. Mine led to Tasmania. Yours led to a dukedom. Both paths stemmed from choices made in pride and pain." Valendra rose, preparing to depart. "The talisman is rightfully yours, the last piece of your mother's legacy restored." As the former countess moved toward the door, Marienne found herself speaking from impulse rather than calculation. "Lady Valendra," the woman paused, turning with a grace that imprisonment had failed to eradicate. "Safe travels to America," Marienne said simply. "May your new beginning prove worthy of the journey required to reach it." Surprise flickered across Valendra's features, followed by something resembling gratitude. "You are generous in victory, Your Grace. Perhaps that explains why he chose you, when he rejected all others." After she departed, Marienne remained in the drawing room, the brass talisman cool against her palm as she contemplated the strange symmetry of their intertwined fates. The woman who had engineered her greatest suffering had unwittingly delivered her to her greatest happiness. Was that truly Valendra Morn? Ceren's voice drew her from contemplation. He stood in the doorway, their 2-year-old daughter Elizabeth cradled in one arm, a tender tableau at odds with the stern reputation he maintained in public life. "Thea mentioned a visitor with a connection to our past." "Indeed." Marienne rose, crossing to embrace husband and child in one motion. She came bearing revelations and apologies, both equally unexpected. "Genuine remorse from Valendra?" His eyebrow arched skeptically. "Tasmania must have wrought miracles." "Perhaps not miracles," Marienne mused, "but change nonetheless. She sails for America soon, a new beginning, as she put it, while we continue the life she inadvertently granted us." Ceren brushed a kiss across her forehead, then glanced down at the talisman in her hand. "What's this?" Marienne related Valendra's revelation about their mother's connection, the orchestrated placement as governess, the second talisman preserved through the years. "Extraordinary," Ceren murmured when she finished. "One might almost believe in fate hearing such a tale, or in justice's peculiar symmetry." She smiled, slipping the talisman into her pocket alongside the first, paired once more after years of separation. "She positioned me for downfall, yet delivered me instead to salvation." "Not salvation," he corrected gently. "Partnership. You saved yourself, Marienne. I merely provided opportunity for your truth to emerge." This characteristic humility, so at odds with his ducal authority, was among the qualities that had transformed her initial respect into enduring love. 5 years of marriage had revealed the man beneath the title, principled yet compassionate, resolute yet tender, especially with their children. As they moved toward the library, James reappeared, throwing himself against his father's legs with unreserved enthusiasm. "Papa, did you see the lady with feathers? Is she a friend from Parliament?" "Not precisely," Ceren replied, ruffling his son's dark curls, "though she once played an important role in Parliament's affairs, and in ours," Marienne added softly. Later that evening, with the children asleep and the house settled into winter quietude, Marienne stood at their bedroom window, watching moonlight transform the snowy landscape into silver brilliance. Ceren joined her, his arms encircling her waist as they gazed outward together. "You're contemplative tonight," he observed, his voice low against her ear. "Valendra's visit stirred memories," she admitted. "The path that brought us here seems increasingly intricate in retrospect." "Regrets?" he asked, the question carrying no insecurity, but genuine concern for her contentment. "None," she assured him, leaning back against his strength. "Though I find myself reflecting on how easily our story might have ended differently, had you not questioned the evidence against me, had you not pursued truth beyond convenience." Had you not maintained dignity when most would have crumbled? Had you not risked escape when safety beckoned from Tasmania's shores? His arms tightened around her. We each made choices that led us here. That is the wonder of it. She turned within his embrace, studying the face that had become her home more surely than any house, any title, any position. The stern lines of authority softened in private, revealing the man few others were privileged to know fully. "Do you recall what you said when you gave me your signet ring in Brackenhaven?" she asked, fingers tracing the contours of his face, familiar territory mapped through 5 years of intimacy. "That I would return, and truth would walk beside me," he recalled, catching her hand to press a kiss against her palm. "Truth has indeed walked beside us," she murmured, "through Privy Council challenges, through society's scrutiny, through the building of this life we share." Outside, snow continued its silent descent, each flake unique, yet part of the blanket transforming the world. Inside, firelight burnished the room in amber warmth, illuminating the life they had constructed from circumstances neither could have anticipated. "To truth," Ceren said softly, drawing her closer, "and to the woman who embodies it." "To justice," Marienne countered, rising on tiptoe to meet his kiss, "and to the man who risked everything to uphold it." As their lips met, the brass talismans rested side by side in her jewelry case, symbols of a journey completed, a circle closed, a love born from the most unexpected circumstances. From prison cell to ducal mansion, from condemned convict to beloved duchess, Marienne's path had wound through darkness into light. And in that light, in her husband's arms, their children sleeping peacefully down the hall, their home secure against winter's chill, she found the truth her mother's talisman had always promised, that even in darkness, one might find one's way home. In the crucible of injustice, true character is not merely revealed but refined. When Marienne stood falsely accused, she chose dignity over despair, integrity over surrender. When Ceren discovered a wrong, he pursued truth rather than convenience, risking his position and reputation for a principle that transcended social expectations. Their story reminds us that justice is not merely an abstract ideal, but a living choice that demands courage. It is easier to accept comfortable falsehoods than to champion uncomfortable truths, yet our humanity lies in this very struggle, in choosing what is right over what is easy, what is true over what is convenient. Perhaps most profound is the recognition that our greatest trials may lead to our greatest blessings. Marienne's imprisonment, designed to destroy her, instead delivered her to the one man who could see beyond circumstance to her essential worth. Ceren's decision to investigate one woman's case, seemingly insignificant against his ducal responsibilities, led him to the partner who would complete both his life and his principles. We cannot always control the injustices that befall us, but we can control how we respond to them. Do we surrender to bitterness, as Valendra initially did, or do we maintain our dignity and truth, as Marienne chose? Do we accept convenient narratives, or do we question, challenge, and seek deeper understanding? The path of integrity is rarely the easiest, but it alone leads to authentic connection, to relationships built on mutual respect rather than convenience or necessity. When we stand for truth, even at personal cost, we create the possibility of genuine love, the kind that recognizes our worth not despite our struggles, but because of the courage with which we face them. Did this story of justice, courage, and unexpected love touch your heart? Subscribe to our channel for more Victorian romances, where dignity triumphs over disgrace and true love emerges from life's darkest moments. What moved you most? Marienne's unwavering dignity? Ceren's principled stand, or their journey from pretense to authentic love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in second chances and the power of truth to transform lives, this story was written especially for you. Don't miss our next chapter of historical romance where honor and heart entwine in the most unexpected ways. Subscribe now and join our community of readers who believe that true love is worth fighting for, even against impossible odds.